Are we good, Joe? All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Danielle Friend, a Senior Director of Science and Regulatory Affairs at BIO. And this is the webinar focused on FDA incorporation of patient perspective data into drug development and review. So thank you for joining us today. We have two great speakers on the docket for our webinar today. First, we have Captain Robyn Bent, who is the Director of the Patient-Focused Drug Development Program and the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the FDA. And then we have Andrea-Furia Helms, who is the Director of the Patient Affairs Staff, Office of the Commissioner, Office of Clinical Policy and Programs at the FDA. Before I hand it over for Robyn and Andrea to present, I do want to emphasize that we will be taking questions throughout this webinar. So if you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A box, and I will kind of filter through those questions at the end of the webinar. And then lastly, before I hand it off to Robyn to kick off, I just want to say thank you so much, Robyn and Andrea, for joining us today. We've been very impressed with the efforts underway at the FDA over the last several years focused on patient-focused drug development, certainly the guidance documents that have been released, the public meetings, the discussion guides, etc. And Andrea, certainly the listening sessions and the very descriptive summaries that have been developed after those listening sessions as well. I know there are many other efforts that I'm sure you all will touch on today, and so to take advantage of the time we have, I will go ahead and hand it over to Robyn to begin her presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Danielle. I'm assuming everyone can see my slides and hear me?
That's
all right, great, thank you. Excellent. So thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robyn Bent. I am the Director of the CDER Patient-Focused Drug Development Program. And I want to start by saying how much we appreciate you being here today. I'm going to present on the Center for Drugs' current and upcoming efforts to facilitate and advance the collection and incorporation of patient input into medical product development and regulatory decision-making. So I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about patient-focused drug development as a whole. Patient-focused drug development is defined as a systematic approach to ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured and are meaningfully incorporated into drug development and evaluation. And so our vision, FDA's vision, is for patient input to be incorporated throughout the drug development process as a standard of practice. The 4 points listed here are how we really think we can make that happen. We're working to really ensure confidence in the reliability and accuracy of the patient experience data. We want to reduce regulatory uncertainty for the sponsor by consistently applying the same standards. We want to promote rapid and consistent adoption of new guidance processes and resources through good communication both inside and outside of the FDA. And finally, we really hope to see a sustained incorporation of the patient's experience in drug development and decision-making, making it a standard of practice. And so we have multiple efforts underway to help this vision become a reality, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them today. So the purpose of this slide is really to show some key areas where patient input can be valuable, but it isn't to imply in any way that these are the only areas in which patient input can be valuable. So in the early stages of clinical development, patient input can really help drug developers and FDA begin to understand what impacts of disease and treatments matter most to patients and help us figure out really what the best ways to measure them. During the planning and conduct of clinical trials, patient input can help us understand what aspects of clinical trials can be better tailored to meet the needs of patients who may participate in the trials. And during the pre-market review stage, FDA can use data obtained directly from patients, such as patient-reported outcomes or patient preference study information, to inform our benefit-risk assessment. And in the post-market setting, patient input can help FDA understand how to best communicate the information to patients and prescribers. So I've been working to make my slide presentations a little more interesting and a little more dynamic, and so I beg your indulgence as I take you through this little journey with me. And the journey starts in 2012 with PDUFA 5 and the benefit risk assessment. So the evaluation of benefit risk is really kind of a dynamic process, and the knowledge of benefits and risks evolve over a product life cycle. Decisions on benefit risk require judgment on the part of the regulator and are influenced by statutory and regulatory standards, societal expectations, and personal values and perspectives. The PFDD initiative was introduced in PDUFA 5 and intended as a way to elicit broader patient input to better inform the clinical context of the benefit risk assessment. So this led to FDA kicking off a series of 24 patient-focused drug development meetings in 2013. So the FDA, both CDER and CDER, started holding disease-specific public meetings that strengthened our understanding of disease and treatment burden. These were our patient-focused drug development meetings. And these meetings provide an important opportunity to hear directly from patients, patient advocates, and caregivers about the symptoms that matter most to them, the impact the disease has on their daily lives, and the patient's experiences with currently available treatment. Each meeting follows a similar but tailored format. We start with a panel of 3 to 5 participants, caregivers, and patient representatives. 3 to 5 patients, caregivers, and patient representatives who share their experiences living with the condition. We then move on to a larger group discussion that encourages participation from other patients, caregivers, and patient representatives attending in person and on the webcast. For topic 1, participants are typically asked to describe how their symptoms manifest, which symptoms related to their condition have the most significant impact on their daily lives, and how their condition has changed over time. For topic 2, participants are asked to describe their current treatment regimen, how their treatment regimen may have changed over time, which symptoms related to their condition are not improved with their treatment regimen, and any other treatment downside. Participants are also asked to identify specifically what they would look for in an ideal treatment, and in some cases, topic 2 discussions have also delved further into understanding participants' decision-making process when considering a new treatment, and other topic areas such as meaningful benefit and considerations for clinical trial participation. So here's a graphic that shows the original 24 meetings held between 2013 and 2017, as well as 2 others that were held in 2018. You're probably aware that we had 2 patient-focused drug development meetings scheduled to be held early in 2020, but those were postponed due to the COVID pandemic. A meeting on stimulant use disorder and a meeting focusing on vitiligo. We're working on rescheduling these meetings and adding others because we've received a lot of feedback that these meetings are really valuable to FDA, to the medical product community, and of course to our patient stakeholders. And so, of course, what we've learned in this meeting is that we've kind of reinforced what we already knew, that patients are really experts in their condition, but also that sometimes what we think matters to patients isn't always what matters to patients, and that sometimes the most obvious symptoms are not the most bothersome symptoms. And that frustratingly, sometimes the endpoints that are being measured in clinical trials don't really reflect what matters to patients. So after we held a number of FDA-led PFDD meetings here at FDA and really appreciated that what we were learning from them, we started hearing from patient organizations about the broader interest to host meetings in disease areas in addition to the 24 originally identified by FDA. And recognizing that FDA would not be able to conduct all the meetings, we started welcoming patient organizations to identify and organize patient-focused collaborations to generate public input on specific disease areas following a format similar to the FDA-led PFDD meeting. These meetings are the externally led PFDD meetings, and I have to say that I am continually impressed by these meetings. I never fail to learn a lot about the disease and really the everyday struggles of people who are living with the condition. The courage that participants show in sharing their most intimate struggles and most vulnerable moments in order to help FDA and medical product developers understand the impacts of their disease is really awe-inspiring. And as you would expect from groups of people who have had to adjust and move forward as life throws challenges, the patient groups have really pivoted to the online platforms more rapidly than the FDA and have started holding PFDD meetings again. Now they're just holding them fully virtually. And I think we are all kind of holding our breaths to see how this would work. I mean, one of the hallmarks of the PFDD meeting is really the personal and in-person nature of the meeting. But these meetings have been really well done, and I'm really impressed with how impactful they've been. So far, we've seen meetings on chronic hepatitis C, on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, on facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, or FSHD, and on muscular dystrophy Pompe disease, all done in a fully virtual setting the start of the COVID pandemic. And I have to say that in every meeting, the stories shared by the panelists and the participants really touched me. One gentleman with FSHD spoke about a time when he fell in front of Grand Central Station. Sorry, it was really moving. While usually people would stop and help him up, because it was raining, people just passed by as he struggled and slipped and tried to stand. At the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy meeting, people spoke of the struggles of dealing with their own disease while watching family members, including their children, struggle with the condition. As you can see, all of these stories are really moving and really compelling. And this kind of moves us to an important next stop in our journey, which is the statement of patient experience. Oops, I keep going the wrong way. We need to move beyond the powerful and compelling narratives. It isn't enough to tell patients that their voices matter. We need to show them. We need to show it. So the 21st Century Cures Act states that FDA is required to make public a brief statement regarding the patient experience data and related information, if any, submitted and reviewed as part of the application. We also need to produce a report assessing the use of patient experience data in regulatory decision-making. So we came up with this data table, and I wanted to show it to you. You can see that the left column, and this is an older version. It's currently being revised a little bit. But you can see that the left side of the table really talks about what patient experience data was submitted. And then the right side of the table directs you to the section of the review where the patient experience data was discussed. And this can be really helpful since the reviews regularly top 200 pages. And at the end of this presentation, I'm kind of going to walk you through some of our websites. One of the websites that I'll walk you through briefly, depending on how much time we have, is the drug review. Is a drug review to show you where the patient experience data table kind of lives within that review and how you can access it. So then moving on, 2017 was a really busy year because it was also the year that we started working on our methodologic guidance series. This is important because we often see variable quality of patient experience data, and we want to be clear about what we need to see as far as quality in order to use patient experience data as part of our decision-making here at FDA. To do this, we set up a series of 4 guidance documents, each of which was accompanied by a workshop to inform its development. And so Guidance 1, Collecting Comprehensive and Representative Input, discusses sampling methods that could be used when planning a study to collect patient input. It also provides a general overview on the relationship between potential research questions and methods when deciding from whom to get input, including defining the target population and development of a sampling strategy. I am happy to say that this document was just finalized back in June. Guidance 2 will discuss methods for eliciting information from individuals identified in Guidance 1 and present a range of methods and establish best practices to identify what is important to patients with respect to burden of disease, burden of treatment, and the benefits and risks in the management of the patient's disease. In particular, the methods and best practices presented in the document can help elicit relevant information from patients and other stakeholders, such as how their disease affects their daily lives, what they find most troublesome, and the challenges, problems, and burdens of the treatment for the disease. It will also reference related resources. This guidance has been published in draft, and we've received a number of comments from stakeholders. We're currently working on incorporating some of the feedback into the document and then finalizing it. Guidance 3 will address refining the list of concepts of interest important to patients for measurement. Given that not everything identified as important by patients, caregivers, and clinicians can be addressed by an investigational treatment or be measured, this guidance will address issues related to selecting what to measure in a medical product development program and identification or development of fit-for-purpose clinical outcome assessments to assess the outcome of importance to patients. We're working on drafting this guidance. The 4th guidance in this series will address topics related to incorporating clinical outcome assessments into endpoints for regulatory decision-making, including clinical outcome-related endpoint development, defining meaningful within patient core changes, and collection, analysis, and interpretation and submission of data. We received great feedback from our public meeting and the related docket last December, and we're in the process of drafting this guidance document as well. And finally, it is not one of the 4 methodologic guidances, but we are developing a guidance to provide our stakeholders with information on how a person seeking to develop and submit a proposed draft guidance related to patient experience data can submit that guidance to the FDA for consideration. And you can see that that draft guidance was published in December of 2018, and we are currently finalizing that as well. So another way we're working to encourage the incorporation of patient input in the drug development process is through the establishment of the standard core clinical outcome assessments and their related endpoints grant program. So let me start a little bit by discussing why FDA develops this program. A core set of endpoints for a given population or disease area can be very useful to regulators, drug developers, and patients. The use of the core sets as part of standard clinical assessment can inform real-world evidence to get long-term safety and effectiveness information because we have the same people using the same tools. There are also benefits to patients because these core sets could be developed in partnership with patients, thus ensuring that the patient voice is incorporated, and also because a thoughtful approach up front as a core set is being developed can really decrease the burden. So FDA developed this program to fund the development of these standard core sets of measures of disease burden and treatment burden for a given area, and will make them, and with the understanding that they will be made publicly available at nominal or no cost. Another hallmark of this grant program is the level of stakeholder engagement. We hold twice yearly public meetings with an opportunity for stakeholders to ask questions and provide feedback, both as part of the meetings and by submitting feedback to the public docket. For your reference, the next public meeting will be held on August 28th. In addition, each grantee has put together an external technical advisory committee made up of disease-specific experts, clinical outcome assessment experts, biostatisticians, patient experts, and other technical experts as appropriate who oversee and monitor the specific projects. And because we realize that many trials are multi-regional and are used by multiple health authorities to make decisions, we've convened a scientific policy board to bring a global perspective to the development process. The board is currently made up of representatives from FDA, the National Institutes of Health, AHRQ, Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, regulatory authorities in both Japan and EMA in Europe. And we anticipate that this will expand. So in mid-September of last year, we made our first 3 grant awards, and we're really excited to be working with these grantees and impressed with the strong teams they put together. They all have a combination of expertise in clinical areas, methodologies, and strong commitment to including the patient community as they develop the core set. The MICOAS team, the Migraine Clinical Outcome Assessment System, will develop and standardize a core set of endpoints and related clinical outcome assessments for use across migraine clinical trials. The POA-APTIC team, Clinical Outcome Assessments for Acute Pain Therapeutics in Infants and Young Children, will identify clinical outcome assessments and endpoints for use when developing acute pain therapeutics in infants and young children, primarily those aged 0 to 2 years. And the Northwestern University Clinical Outcome Assessment Team, or NUCOAT, will develop and validate COAs with applicability across a range of chronic conditions that assess physical function using patient-reported and performance outcomes. And finally, I would like to bring your attention to a new funding opportunity announcement that we released last week. And the purpose of this second funding opportunity announcement is to solicit applications to support the development of publicly available core sets of clinical outcome assessments and their related endpoints for the following 4 areas: fluid overload and nephrotic syndrome, age-appropriate domains of pediatric daily function, the mechanics of swallowing and speech from infancy to adulthood, and treatment effects in systemic sclerosis. And this application, this is due October 14th. And so this kind of brings us full circle as you look at the benefit risk assessment framework and we talk about analysis of the conditions and the current treatment options and move on to the benefit. You can see how the PFDD has really come full circle to really inform all of the elements of the benefit risk assessment. And so now I'd like to draw your attention to some relevant links. I'm going to see, we'll see if this works. This is going a little, We're going to go to a live website. Fingers crossed. Are we going to a live website? We are. Okay. So I just wanted to bring your attention. This is the CDER patient-focused drug development website. And it really contains a lot of information about kind of our philosophies. You'll notice some of the text that I used in my presentation today also lives on this website. It gives you an idea of what we do and how to contact us. On this page, it also provides links to our strongest program and areas that we talked about initially, the 21st Century Cures and PDUFA 6, which really is where the our methodologic guidance series lives, and you can find all of the information and up-to-date information here. The grant program provides a lot of information about the grant program. It links to the funding announcement that we've now put up here. It gives you a lot more information about the awards that I was able to provide today. We have the website for the FDA-led patient-focused drug development meeting. And you'll see that we have the information here, and each one of these within it, you have if you were not able to attend the meeting or you became involved in this in the community later on, we have the meeting agendas, the slides, the recordings of the meetings, the transcripts, as well as kind of the voice of the patient report, and those all live on the FDA-led PFDD meeting site. And finally, we do have the externally led PFDD meeting site. Now, this site actually provides a lot more information for patient groups who are interested in having an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. It gives ideas for our criteria and just kind of walks you through the letter of intent and other aspects of that. But what we've recently done, because I'm sure you may notice that this, if you've been to our site before, this looks a little bit different, and it's now kind of gone live as of yesterday, so it looks different as of yesterday, is we've created kind of an area that we thought would be more helpful as far as helpful links. So here, for example, this will take you to our upcoming meeting, directly to a link to the upcoming meetings. If you want to find the externally led PFDD meeting report, you want to see that, you can click on this, and it gives you links to all of the sites, all the organizations that have submitted their version of the Voice of the Patient report to us, and things like that. I think some of you are probably aware that the Oncology Center for Excellence, which is out of the Commissioner's office, did launch their Project Patient Voice, and you can get to their website as a link through ours, and it will talk to you a little bit more about their Project Patient Voice. Obviously, we also have the patient affairs links, but I'm not going to show you those because that kind of defeats Andrea's purpose. And also to CDRH. So moving away from that, and most of these links are here, although they also are linked directly from here. And then finally, kind of to wrap up my speaking, I know it's gone a little long and I apologize. I just wanted to bring your attention to, if you are interested in finding a drug review, how you would go about doing this within CDER. And so CDER has two options. If you wanted to see just a list of all of the drugs that were approved for a specific year, you could click on the link. Sorry, it opens on another screen. And you can see all of the novel drug reviews approved for so far in 2020. If you wanted to go back to 2019 or 2018, you can do that as well. The other option, if you want to look up a specific drug, is that you can do it here. And this brings you to the drugs at FDA. And so let's say I want to look up a specific drug, and I see the drug. I click on it. I hope that it loads. I really hope that it loads. Okay. Maybe it doesn't load. Just when you're ready to give up. And then you can click on the approval date, and you can find the review here. It's a drop down. And then I usually look at the multidisciplinary review. And this one's 264 pages, but I am a big fan of the Control F button, where I type in patient experience data, and I realize that it goes to page 12. And so I click on this and discover that page 12 is not page 12. Sorry, patient. And you can find the patient experience data table here. And you can see here that for this application, the applicants submitted the clinical outcome assessments, patient-reported outcomes, and clinician-reported outcome measures here in, and it's discussed in section 8.1. Another area that is really informative is right above it, the benefit risk assessment, and kind of the summary that's in the top that really kind of gives you an overall idea of what people were thinking, what the reviewers were thinking. Because once you get into section 8.1, you get a lot of statistical detail and a lot of things like that. But I very much find that this section here, the benefit risk assessment, the narrative portion, really provides a really good understanding. And so we'll be happy to share these slides with you in case you want these links for reference. But that is all I have, and I am now very happy to turn the floor over to my colleague, Andrea-Furia Helms, who will talk to you more about the high-level FDA patient engagement.
Thanks, Robyn. And 1 second as I get to my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea-Furia Helms, and I am the Director of the Patient Affairs staff in the Office of the Commissioner. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to BIO for inviting me and my colleague Robyn to participate in this webinar on how FDA involves patient and advocate perspectives in the agency's work. So during this presentation, I will cover ways the FDA includes patient and advocate perspectives in our regulatory activities, share patient engagement opportunities available to engage with us, and also share some resources that may be helpful to you. And I apologize, I have like 2 screens going to make sure everything's functioning forward. So I'm just going to start off with an overview and really start with the importance of the patient voice. So really, we want to just share like why FDA thinks patients and caregiver perspectives are important in our work. So patients and caregivers provide insight on issues, needs, and priorities that are important to patients and their family members. They also have diverse opinions and experiences that provide and shed light on risk tolerance and potential benefit. And of course, their real-world experiences in real-world settings that really remind us of the human element in this. So ultimately, patients are at the heart of FDA's work and activities. So now about this slide, I know it's a busy one, but it's really only meant to demonstrate that the ongoing patient activities at FDA have been long ongoing and increasing over the past 30 years. It's really hard to pinpoint when patient engagement at FDA really started, but there was an increase in engagement at the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis in the late 1980s. And since then, time has been evolving, and so have we. We've been involving patient stakeholders in our work and have been increasing and evolving ever since. So now I want to just talk a little bit about patient affairs. Like, who are we? What do we do? Before I get to really that information, I want to dig a little deeper into the history. As I mentioned, there was increased engagement at the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis in the late 80s. In response to this, an office was established to interact with and build relationships with patients and advocates specifically with the HIV/AIDS community. That office then expanded to include oncology and then eventually all serious and life-threatening diseases and conditions. Now, in more recent years, center-specific patient engagement offices and staffs have been established, as each of the centers have unique issues to products they regulate, which you have heard from Robyn earlier. And Patient Affairs was established in late 2017, so we're still slightly new, after a trans-FDA study on patient engagement activities determined a need for a cross-center effort at the commissioner level, which has a focus on cross-cutting issues, and also to be sort of that central entry point or front door, if you will, for patients who do not know where to begin in contacting the agency. So we work very closely with the medical product centers, drugs, biologics, and devices, as well as other offices in the agency, and we collaborate together with patient communities to enhance patient engagement efforts and really ultimately find ways that we can include patient perspectives in FDA's work. Sorry. So these are some of our programs and activities I will talk about today. Our patient listening sessions, our EMA FDA patient engagement cluster, the patient engagement collaborative, and enhancing communications that we've been working to really maintain connection with our communities. So patient listening sessions are one of the many ways FDA is expanding patient involvement. They encourage communication between the patient community and FDA staff, and I'll go into more detail in the following slides. Currently, the focus on our patient listening sessions are on rare diseases and are conducted in collaboration with our partner, the National Organization for Rare Disorders, or NORD, through a memorandum of understanding. They allow FDA staff to engage with and hear experiences directly from patients and caregivers and advocates to help better inform medical product development and other regulatory issues. So for example, listening sessions provide an understanding of disease and treatment burden, functionality and impact on daily activities, and priorities to consider when developing new medical products. But they also educate review division staff about the rare diseases. And just from the patients and advocates participating, it helps them understand FDA's work a little bit better, and they provide a starting point to inform early stage research and development. So just to talk a little bit more what patient listening sessions are and are not, they are non-public, non-advisory discussions between FDA, patients, caregivers, and other advocates. They're approximately 1 to 2 hour meetings by phone. However, prior to our current circumstances, they may have been in person as well as a combination of in person and on the phone, but currently they're all virtual. And they are meant to facilitate expeditious sharing of patient and advocate perspectives on their disease experience. They are not currently open to just anyone. Only FDA, patients, caregivers, and advocates participate in these sessions. And at times, NIH also participates. They are not a way to endorse any specific medical product, as they are focused on disease experience only. They're not able to guarantee representativeness or comprehensive perspectives on disease or treatment burden, as these are very informal, small discussions. And they are not meant to take the place of any other input and engagement process like the FDA Patient Representative Program, or as Robyn discussed, the patient-focused drug development meetings. Okay, so there are 2 types of listening sessions. FDA can request them internally, and this is when FDA staff have a specific set of questions to ask a particular patient subpopulation. But they can also be requested by external patient groups, and this is when a patient community wants to share their experiences and perspectives with FDA. During these sessions, FDA staff will either ask questions or simply listen to better understand a patient's experience with a disease or condition. So far, we have completed 7 sessions this year, and we have 8 more scheduled for the year. And we seem to have more popping up in the meantime, so we might have more than that. But at this point, for the patient ones that are requested by patient groups, we have such an overwhelming response that they're being scheduled for 2021 right now. The link at the bottom of the slide is where you can find information about the listening sessions, how to request one, and the meeting summaries that have been conducted since we started. I'm going to share some examples of issues that may be discussed during these listening sessions. So for patient experiences, some examples include symptoms and aspects of the disease that patients and caregivers consider are most important to address, disease burden and symptom progression, activities and functions that are most important to preserve or even restore, and experiences on how current treatment regimens are working to manage their symptoms. And as a reminder, these are typically in rare disease areas, so they don't usually have any treatments available to them. Sorry, it's not advancing. Oops. Apologies. So for treatment options, some examples of issues that may be discussed include perspectives about priorities for potential treatments for disease, understanding their expectations for potential treatment, what might be considered as meaningful outcomes for new therapies, their views about potential medical products that may decrease the severity of symptoms rather than completely remove or resolve it, and perspectives on level of willingness to continue in an investigational medical product before a patient started to feel some relief. So really, would they continue, and how long might they consider to continue something if they're not feeling immediate relief? And so for clinical trials, some examples include considerations about participating in clinical trial for an investigational product, like including barriers to participating in clinical trials, or even natural history studies that sometimes is part of the conversation, understanding benefit-risk trade-offs associated with severe or life-threatening side effects, exploring study designs that are better tailored for patients and caregivers to really encourage their participation, and differences in perceptions or possible experiences between an investigational drug or a gene therapy, and determine meaningful clinical endpoints. So because we're always aiming to enhance our future listening sessions, Patient Affairs sends out a survey to listening session participants after each listening session. And these are examples of what FDA staff have shared from their experiences. And the first one, it really gets to that human element that I mentioned earlier. I was especially touched by the man who took his own life. On the other end of the spectrum was the mother with the boys and the other woman who still had children and seemed to be able to cope better in some ways. People cope with diseases differently. This is such a devastating disease. It was really eye-opening, a really eye-opening patient listening session. Then another one said that patient comments appear to be in line with the type of information that the agency needs to help understand for development of products. And another reviewer said, I appreciate the discussion regarding the mismatch of endpoints and hope that we will be able to use the information to inform drug development. And so some other feedback is an example of how an older man gave useful specific examples of what impact of a disease was important to his functionality and independence. This is the information that can be useful for study design and endpoints. Someone else mentioned that the patients and caregivers who spoke did an amazing job covering their experiences, concerns, and desires for treatments. They were remarkable. I truly appreciated hearing from them. And since we have been conducting completely virtual sessions now, someone said virtual listening sessions are just as valuable as in person. You are able to easily view the presentation, but also fully listen to the patient's experience without being distracted by other individuals attending the session. And then finally, I just want to share some feedback from the patient and caregivers that participated. And they seem to have demonstrated that these were valuable to participate in as well. One patient said, I felt the listening sessions was very valuable. I hung up the phone and said to my husband immediately, I think that went very well. They were trying so hard to understand what living with gastroparesis really is like. They were really listening. Someone else said, I definitely feel the FDA heard all of our perspectives during the listening sessions. I thought the follow-up questions were excellent and explored our answers more deeply so as to really try and understand what we are trying to convey. And then finally, it is very heartening to our community to see such interest in action taken to enhance the agency's understanding of what patients and families face with Sanfilippo. Funky things going on over here. Sorry. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Something we often hear and why FDA and EMA don't collaborate as much. Well, we actually do. The European Medicines Agency and the FDA established a number of clusters over the years. And some examples are pediatric, medicinal products, oncology, hematology products, pharmacovigilance, rare diseases, blood products, and so on. There's a number of them. And because patient engagement is a priority for both agencies, and after we had a mutual fellowship exchange between FDA and EMA, the patient engagement cluster was established. And what we do when we meet quarterly is to share our approaches and for engaging and involving patient stakeholders, discuss high-profile topics of mutual interest, especially those with potential of high public interest, and then continue to discuss priorities and goals for continued collaboration and enhancing our engagement activities. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see a reference for an article we published if you're interested in our mutual learnings and what we've implemented from them. And so another activity that we have is the Patient Engagement Collaborative, which is a collaboration between the FDA and the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, also known as CDER, through our public-private partnership. It is comprised of an external group of patient organizations and individual representatives to explore topics about enhancing patient engagement in medical product development and regulatory discussions at FDA. The first cohort decided they wanted to really focus on communication. So they've been helping us improve our For Patients webpage, as they said it needed a lot of help. And now we're discussing a program to educate patient communities about FDA, really to help them better understand what we do and what we don't do and kind of have some mythbusters. So that's currently underway right now. And the other thing that Patient Affairs really works on is, from hearing from our patient stakeholders is, they were confused, like where do we begin to find information? So we've really been working hard to enhance various means of communication. We're currently, as I mentioned, working to improve the FDA's For Patients webpage. And that's with the help of the Patient Engagement Collaborative. And changes are coming soon, so stay tuned. And part of the reason why I won't be walking through like sort of the website and how to get to that is because things are going to be totally changed after the facelift, and it might be useless at that point. So I didn't want to confuse people, but I'll have a resource with links for things for you to check out so you have direct access. We're also aiming to be continuing our connections with patient communities through Twitter. So like we share important FDA safety announcements, updates about where patient affairs might be speaking or attending conferences or webinars like this one. And we also have an educational series called Patients Matter. And this is really to help patients and caregivers understand FDA, our programs, and how you can get involved. Lastly, we maintain a very large database of patient advocacy organizations, and that's really so we can send targeted emails to patient communities on relevant FDA-related communications to patient stakeholders. So now I just want to share some of the resources that I mentioned. So this slide is a busy one, but really it's a resource for you. It's contacts and URLs that you may find helpful when you're speaking to learn more about the patient engagement programs and initiatives across the agency. And each of the centers and the Office of the Commissioner have various activities and initiatives that you can really learn more about and how to get involved. Whoops. And again, because it was apparent from our patient stakeholder feedback that it wasn't so easy to know where to begin in contacting FDA. So we worked closely with the medical product centers in creating this web form, like a patient portal for patients and their advocates to submit inquiries and meeting requests. The patient portal is called Patients Ask FDA. And it's really an expansion on the already existing Request a Meeting on Drugs that CDER had previously developed. So always thank you to CDER for getting that so that we could leverage that platform. And so please visit Patients Ask FDA if you have a question or are interested in meeting with FDA. And finally, as you may have noticed, there's a lot of new information constantly coming out of FDA regarding COVID-19. And you can find this information off the FDA.gov main page. However, we noticed that it may be a little bit overwhelming for patients and their caregivers to find information relevant to them. So we created a COVID-19 resource page specifically for patients. It's updated daily, so check it out. You can always access it through the For Patients landing page at fda.gov/patients. And from there, click on COVID-19 resources for patients. And lastly, I just wanted to share with you, this is the patient affairs team. We have, I'm sorry for the blank photo box there. We have just had a new addition as of yesterday, so we don't have a photo for her yet. But just remember, when in doubt and you're not sure where to begin at FDA, we are always happy to help. So thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back to Danielle.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea and Robyn. Those presentations were excellent, and I can already see there are some questions starting to roll in. So for those of you participating, please feel free to keep sending those in. But we'll go ahead and get started with that Q&A session. Maybe one of the first questions I'll pose indicates that the PACE team had been extremely beneficial in assisting patient advocacy organizations navigating CDER's PAOs to appropriate staff to assist with the PAO program and provide speakers for PAO events. Is this team still in place? And if so, how can we contact members of that team?
So I can take that if you want to break, Andrea. That team is very much still in place, and thank you for bringing them up. They really do an amazing job of working with CDER-specific stakeholders and patient engagement efforts. And so they have a website, and Andrea actually very kindly provided a link to that website. And I believe, although again it just went up yesterday, our page also provides a link to the CDER PACE people. But their email address is CDER, C-D-E-R, PACE, P-A-S-E, at fda.hhs.gov. And so I don't know how this works. If I I believe I sent an answer, but I don't know if it goes just to the person who asked the question or if it goes to everybody. So that is their email address, and Andrea has provided the web link.
Great, thanks so much, Robyn. We can certainly also send it out with the slides as well. And maybe that is one thing I should have mentioned. There was a question that came in that asked if the session is being recorded and or if participants will have access to the slides, and the answer is yes. We will make sure you get a recording shortly after the session, and Andrea and Robyn are happy to share their slides. Maybe the next question I think is geared a little bit more towards Robyn. Someone asked, you know, you talked about the statement of patient experience included in the multidisciplinary review documents for products that are approved. The person indicated that multidisciplinary review documents, however, are not published for supplemental applications. So the PED table may not be available for those applications. Can you comment on that?
So I can comment more on the availability of the reviews, and I think that that is correct, that for a large number of supplements that the reviews are not made available, and a lot of that has to do with our resources and the amount of time it takes to redact the necessary information and things like that. It's not an across the board. There are some that are available. Once I saw the question, I kind of started looking, and so there are some where the review is made available, but just the sheer volume as far as labeling changes, and the sheer volume just makes it so that it can't be done kind of across the board.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Robyn. And Andrea, this question is targeted towards you. Certainly, Robyn, if you have any other comments, please feel free to step in. But someone indicated that it's their perception that the FDA knows a lot about diseases, but oftentimes many families who are experiencing a disease may have a lot of information that they want to share with the FDA. So can you comment on how one might evaluate whether the information that perhaps a family or a patient has to share is of value to the FDA?
That's one of the things that I think both Robyn and I really have discussed and really feel passionate about, is that that patients are experts in their disease, and really being able to share those experiences and their stories is really pertinent to FDA's work. It can inform so many different things. So, for example, with the listening sessions, things like it has informed maybe for the division to better understand what might be meaningful endpoints for patients when there's new medical products being developed. It has informed some guidances that they have been writing to make sure that they're addressing issues that are priorities and important to patients. The listening sessions have also provided, the stories and experience have provided input on if FDA is trying to develop an agenda for a public meeting. They want to make sure that they're really getting to the heart of the issues for patient communities. And there's so many different ways to get your voice heard now at FDA, and we are happy to have a conversation to explore all those ways. So you can just reach out to Patient Affairs, and we would explain all of those different ways and see what's a better fit for the need at that time.
Great, thanks so much, Andrea. And there was maybe perhaps a follow-up question. How is the best way to get in touch with a Patient Affairs staff? They're wondering if there's a single email address that they can contact if they do have any questions.
Yep, there's email, patientaffairs@fda.gov. We have a phone number, which is on my last slide, and you also can always submit your question through Patients Ask FDA, the patient portal, and all those resources and links are in my presentation. Perfect.
So a question did come to me via email, and in particular, it's talking about the the external resources, Robyn, that you had kind of pointed to. So some of the external PFDD sessions that are being held and some of the summaries that are coming out of those. And the question is whether perhaps that website could also link to the listening session summaries that are developed by the Patient Affairs staff. I don't know if either of you have comments on that.
So I don't see a reason. I don't think there's any sort of technological reason why it can't. And so I think that we certainly do link to the patient affairs staff on our homepage. But if people think that there's value in adding additional links under the externally led, I think what the one thing that we're trying to do is kind of keep things clean. And we have the FDA-led voice of the patient in one section and the externally led, which are actually linked to external sites for the most part. But I can certainly talk to my web people. I'd like to think there's no technological limitations, but I have to say that every time we delve into web development, we discover that there are significantly more limitations than we anticipate. So, but we can certainly look into that. If we can do it, there's no reason not to.
Great, thanks, Robyn. So perhaps I think this might be a question for both of you. The question is, to what extent is it helpful for FDA reviewers to get patient experience data from industry sponsors, and that's qualitative or quantitative data, as opposed to data that is from patient organizations, maybe via some of the PFDD meetings or other patient experience data collected by patient organizations?
I think Robyn's best to answer that one.
So I think that's a really great question, and I'm not. I don't think that I have a single answer for it. I think it really depends on what information we're receiving, what information non-industry sponsors, the patient organizations, would be providing. I think the information from PFDD meetings is always really valuable because it really helps us understand kind of the context, the therapeutic context in which the drug is being developed, really understand kind of what the symptoms are that people are suffering with, and really the impact that it's really having on their daily lives, and what the current treatments are offering and what they're not offering. And so I think that that's always extremely helpful information. I think that our reviewers really appreciate getting any information that kind of helps them frame their review in the context of the real world. And so I would say that it's helpful, but I would also say that it has to be well done and really representative and such. I think it's kind of a balance. I don't want to say everybody send everything, because if our reviewers have 10,000 pages of information to review, that's not gonna be as helpful as, you know, shorter, more succinct, clearly well done kind of information.
Great, thank you, Robyn.
And I'll just jump in to say that I think there's processes in place in both for the patient-focused drug development, like the letter of intent process, and with our listening sessions, to really understand the timing is important too, and to make sure that the review division staff could really use that information at that point in time. Because I'll tell you an example. I know that a patient organization leadership had talked to me one time and said, you know, we were going to send in a listening session request, and then a year went by because, you know, whatever, we never get around to it. And we actually were glad that that year went by, because there were new discoveries, and it actually changed the direction in the conversation. And had they had it earlier, it might have been sort of quote unquote outdated to a certain extent, because things have sort of shifted based on that new discovery. So I think that our processes really get to that, to understand what the need is at that moment in time and make sure the timing is aligned for that particular disease area and what's needed for the agency.
Okay, great. I know we're coming to the end of our time here. Maybe just a very brief follow-up question to the last question is, if a patient organization is collecting data, how should they go about, you know, reaching out to the FDA to begin discussions or talk about the data that they might be collecting, or certainly if they're considering collecting data, how would one engage with the agency on that?
Robyn, I don't know. So I'll just start. There is a mechanism for that, and it's called the CPIM. What is CPIM? Help me with the acronym. Critical Path Innovation. Critical Path Innovation Meeting, sorry, it's a CDER-specific initiative, and I think that's a good place to start, and that those meetings are really for industry and even patient organizations to come together and meet with. It's a non-regulatory, non-binding meeting, but at least to get some kind of input from FDA experts in what they're trying to do, develop, maybe it's a tool, or just to get some kind of input and direction from FDA. And Robyn, anything else you have to add, please do.
No, I think you covered it really well. I think that is a really great way to kind of get input from the people that, from the subject matter experts to really take the first step.
Well, great. I know there are a lot of other questions that unfortunately we won't get to today, but I will certainly kind of sift through them, and if there are any ways we can get answers to them back out to the individuals, we'll be happy to pass it along. But again, thank you so much, Andrea and Robyn. We really appreciated your time today, and it was great to see all of the work that you're doing. So thank you again so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.